Trees that tell tales. A common feature of the rainforest and the mangrove swamp is a large belt of tall, lush green and woody vegetation. So, in the southern part of Nigeria, where these two climatic features are predominant, the sight of huge tall trees would not be anything but out of the ordinary. However, there existed and still exist some trees whose narratives attract more than just a passing attention. These are trees regarded as totems in their respective locations, which have mythical stories woven around them, and people either worship or dread them. This seems to be a fairly common manifestation in most communities in Nigeria, even in the Middle Belt region, where trees are of average height and the bushes are not so green. Thus, in Akwa Ibom State, which lies in the thick of the rainforest belt of the south, such trees are also commonplace. They are distributed almost evenly among the geopolitical zones, such that there is hardly any federal constituency without a prominent one. The very notable ones are in the state are the Komiman in Etinan, Udare Kayen in Ikorekbene, Akanawan Ibekwe in Ikorabasi, which later mysteriously fled to Ikorabiosan in Orogonam, Okana Fort in Uyo, Udari Korakban in Sirubium, Ukam Ikorese Kong in Ekit, Eyuek Benobo in Etinan, Fiaitu in Uyo, Nda Candida etu esieni Ikonya in Sirubum, and Ifia Ikoridum Akai in a corn area of Ikorabasi. Even up to 1990, a traveler from Imo or Abia State entering Akwa Ibom State through Ikorekbene was sure to come across a tree in the middle of the road in the Tagodara section of the Ikorekbene Uyo Highway. Commuters often wondered what kind of road design would accommodate a tree of average status in the middle of a very busy interstate route. It came to pass that it was never a deliberate design by road construction engineers, but a design sustained by a myth which assumed that hell would no longer contain the wicked if the tree was removed from the spot. Tales, but such claims abound almost everywhere in the state and elsewhere. Each of the 31 local government areas have such myths in trees, in streams, in shrines, and all that pertains like them. The communities in which they are located worship them and hold them in awe. Modern religion notwithstanding, In some communities, people hold memorials. In others, they nicodemously pay obeisance to them and even offer sacrifices for appeasement when they are provoked. Where they are worshipped openly, such would have chief priests and attendants. They have worshippers too. They stand there as deities. The coming of the Europeans and their brand of religion only slightly altered the belief system of the typical people. Although it shifted the space and style of worship, it did not completely remove the fears associated with offending the local deities. Thus, even the born-again, spirit-filled and tongue-talking Christians at the time often warned their words to give unto God what is God's and leave Caesar alone to contend with his inventions. The core traditionalists still held onto their customs and traditions. In fact, there were quite a number of those who were holding the Holy Bible in one hand and the tender palm frond in the other, shouting Hallelujah and Abracadabra at alternate convenient times. Trees were the most common abode of the mysteries. Some communities even had what they called evil forests, where the sublime lived in ethereal aura. Bodies of those who died unbecoming circumstances were thrown into such forests, which were believed to be inhabited by evil spirits. The mysterious trees were believed to be the abodes of ancestors of several clans in the days when myth transformed physical objects into some esoteric totems. And any attempt by any person or group of persons to tamper with them or trespass their vicinity was tantamount to inviting monumental cataclysm, not only to the offender, but to the entire clan. Needless to say, traditionalists would not take such intransigence lying on the bare floor. Such trees were treated as the epitome of supreme Godhead in their host communities, the mouthpiece of the ancestors who had long departed to the land where only the spirits transact businesses. Homage was paid to such trees, and routine sacrifices were offered to them before any major decision affecting the community and the people are taken. They actually believed that failure in complying with those could incur the wrath of the gods. For some very curious happenstances, these things manifested even if coincidentally, therefore giving impetus to such beliefs. Some families and communities still do them till today. Stories abound of some trees that mysteriously moved from one location to another when they were threatened in their original places of abode. Others are said to have deified several attempts to destroy them. The Ekomi man, standing on the Tinan, a back road, is perhaps one of the most notorious among such trees still standing today. It is so because it has survived several attempts at removal, even though located at a very strategic intersection in the geographical trajectory of the state. It is also popular because the village in which it is located, in which it is rooted, is known by its existence. The area is also known as Ekomima, a very popular location off Uyo Etinan Eket Highway. As is common with such deities, it has a chief priest who must come from the lineage of custodians in a particular village of Iman clan. The priests are said to be direct descendants of Itina Iman, which is the supreme deity of the clan. It is believed to be the ancestral godhead of the Iman clan, whose people occupy the entire Etinan local government area and the Awa section of Ona local government area of Akwa Ibom State. Stories told about this tree are legion. Those that readily come to mind are from the lips of one of the chief priests, Chief Udo Ekpo Obot, who lived up to the 19th century. He narrated how the tree sent shock waves down the spines of some unbelievers when in 1957 an attempt was made to bring it down. To their consternation, fresh blood spewed from the wounds inflicted by their machetes. This was followed by guttural cries and shrieking sounds of the spirits that tread their stock in the bowel of the trees. From then on, no one from that community dared go near the tree with any sharp object, with the intention of cutting it down. Local folks would ordinarily not bother about dissuading a doubting Thomas from trying his luck. For the implication of looking the other way. Nonetheless, attempts are actually made. In 1977, when the construction of the Etinan Abak Road was going on, the construction company handling the project is said to have uprooted the tree from its roots. But by the time the workers returned the following morning to continue with their, they found the tree standing there. There is nothing, as if nothing had ever happened to it in a century. That fell into with a similar eerie story of the exploits of the tree during the Nigeria-Biafra Civil War. It is said to have been the single most potent deterrent to the rebel army's advancement into Etina. All efforts from the rebellious Biafrans met with a deliberate resistance from the invisible troops of the Ekomiman tree. Any moment the attacking troops of the Biafran battalion were in view, the tree released volleys of staccato sounds with the fury of an attacked garrison, sending the invaders scampering in different directions. This happened severally until the intelligence team of the rebel army discovered that it was a mere tree that was playing pranks on them with the ferocity of wounded lions. The embittered troops set to work to bring down the recalcitrant tree. But that contemptuous act cost the rampaging rebel forces almost a battalion of its soldiers. Another construction company that attempted to fell the tree in 1987 eventually had to seek help from the community after the contemptuous attempt failed. The company had to surrender to the tree and abandon their mission, as the road had to take another course. But by sitting idly by and watching outsiders desecrate the sanctity of the deity, the community had to pay a price. It was struck with famine that lasted until the deity was accordingly pleased. While others see the tree as just an ordinary plant, the community people had and still have a different perception. The tree for them is their benefactor, protector, and advisor rolled into one. It protects the clan from famine and shields its people during times of war. In those days of intercommunal warfare, the community was strictly on its own and was sure to lick its wounds for a long time if it went to war without first consulting the deity. It is a belief that works for them, and they have decided to stay with it. In the days gone by, the tree was in addition reputed to possess some casting, binding, and subduing powers on afflictions considered to be associated with those who run evil enterprises. For instance, in the days when twins were considered a taboo, a tree had a reputation of overpowering the famed evil spirits believed to be embedded in such beds. Such spirits were cast away once twins were brought to the foot of the tree. The Ekomi man is not alone in this telltale category. The Udarekayan in Ikorekbene and Ojuku in Obunabari in Port Harcourt share the same genre of the story. A good number of those who had any business whatsoever in Ikorekbene before February 1990, Udarekayan, which used to sit pretty in the middle of Ikorekbene Uyo Highway, just a stone throw from the Ikorekbene Motor Park, was a mystery to behold. It was not a particularly huge tree, but it was fresh all year round. The harassment of passing vehicles, slapping its boughs at random, did not affect its status. Not that its branches were spread wide into the road. No. It seemed to have understood its environment and so restricted the spread of its branches. One thing was sure, though, there were no implications of those branches. There were no implications if those branches got in the way of traffic and got broken by a passing vehicle. In spite of the tree's location in the middle of such a busy thoroughfare, vehicles hardly ran into it. It was said to be as old as Ikoregbone itself. Its reputation was as complimentary as it was eerie and hair-splitting. Like the Ekomi man, several unsuccessful attempts are said to have been made in the past to dislodge it until 1990, when it was eventually uprooted. Evidence of such failed attempts was obvious. Or how could it be explained that in spite of the number of times the road was redesigned and reconstructed, the tree was still left standing like a road traffic sign, right there in the middle of the ever-busy motorway? The Udarekayen, according to the custodians, was only a symbol of a shrine. The real shrine is a flowing stream underneath the tree. The tree was only there to protect the shrine's vicinity from unnecessary trespass. Sonny Ikwat, a staff of the moribund Mercantile Bank, who lived very close to the tree, used to regale his visitors with the exploits of the tree. This usually followed promptings by his visitors, who wanted to know why the tree was left in the middle of the road, in spite of the obvious danger it portended to road users. In one of such narrations, he talked excitedly about an incident which still frightened him any time the issue was raised. In that particular incident, an attempt was made to remove the tree during the daytime. And hell was let loose at night. All manner of snakes in various shapes and sizes swarmed the entire neighborhood. There was, however, nothing compared to the eerie cries of spirits each time attempts were made to kill those slippery, venomous reptiles. During that particular attempt, the tree was actually cut down, with its fruits scattered everywhere. The snakes and the spirits emerged from where it was uprooted. But the following day, the tree returned and occupied its original spot as if nothing had ever happened. Even the hitherto scattered fruits returned to the exact branches they fell from. An old man living in Ikoregbone then could claim to have seen the tree when it was young, as it had seen generations of the people. It was believed that no one born of a woman, through whatever means, could remove the tree from that spot. In fact, if anyone tried, he would have his story told only by others. And the tree itself would still remain as enigmatic. The shrine which the tree symbolized had a chief priest. Chief who was also the village head of Uruguso and clan head of Ikoregbone. Chief Uroirom was a very dedicated custodian, and he was proud of it. As far as he was concerned, the tree represented the ancestral spirit of nursing mothers and had been there from time immemorial. He was always quick to remind those who had doubts about the age of the tree that the community where it stood, Etaudara, was named after it. A name the community is still being identified today. Before it was eventually removed, the chief priest had boasted that the tree cannot be cut down, having on many occasions defied the cutlass and the axe. Not that attempts were never made, they were made a number of times, but to him, the most memorable one was that of 1951, when a certain Uda Ibok from Adiasim was contracted by the colonial masters to dislodge the tree, to make way for the highway. Uda Ibok was reputed to be a very powerful medicine man, whose fame in dislodging mysterious trees was widely acknowledged, even in faraway crimes. It was for this reason that the white men sought for and hired him. He armed himself with his famed amulets and set to work. After cutting down the tree, he left for home, feeling satisfied that he had added another feather to his feet. But the tree was seen the following day on its feet, roots, stem, and full bores, as if nothing had ever happened to it. During the night of the incident, a large tongue of fire was burning from the point from where the tree was cut. Guttural cries of spirits rent the air, while strange snakes had a field day at its base that night. And in spite of the glowing fire, in the morning, smoke was still oozing out of the resurrected tree. 3 days after the mysterious resurrection, the white men, angered by the development, summoned Udaibok back to finish the work for which he was hired. While he was trying to bring down the tree the second time, the axe head flew off the handle and landed on Udaibok's head. And that was the last moment the erstwhile powerful medicine man was seen breathing. As proudly narrated by the chief priest, it is customary that in such situations, sacrifices must follow for normalcy to return. After the initial sacrifice, it became a routine annual exercise until 1962, when the family, which had the responsibility of tending the shrine, had a challenge. The man whom the lot fell on to superintend the shrine was converted to Christianity, and that was how the sacrifice stopped. However, women who had childbearing challenges still visited the shrine to seek their heart's desire. Another claim is that of the tree's influence in the area during the Civil War. Soldiers that invaded Ikorekbene would not leave around the Itaodara axis because of the strange noises that issued from the tree at night. The noise was only heard by invaders. It intimidated them, thus insulating inhabitants of the area from the brutality of the wartime soldiers. Chief Akpan Esiet Udokai, who was the village head of Ekorekbene in the year the tree was felled, also told stories that were in line with the chief priest's perspective. Chief Akai, in whose community the tree stood, and who was in his 60s at the time, could vividly remember people offering sacrifices in the shrine in the 1950s. According to him, sacrifices were usually offered at the foot of the tree. It used to be done in the night because of the road, so that the traffic flow would not affect the solemnity of the ritual. However, the tree was eventually removed, and it was a cynosure that elicited extreme trepidation. On February 26, 1990, the die was cast and the deed was done. The people were expectantly astonished, although the tree had enjoyed the center space of a very important thoroughfare for ages. Because of its fabled sacredness, the incident of that fateful day rendered all the tales so ordinary. It was like a bolt from the blue. Nobody expected it, neither the chief priest nor the traditional rulers. Of course, they fumed and raged because, to them, it was pure sacrilege, an action that amounted to the desecration of the shrine and a calculated insult on the people. By about 10:30 a.m., when the sacrilege was committed, the chief priest was at the Gagara Hall in Ikorekbane attending a budget briefing session by the local government council chairman. When he heard the news, he dashed to the spot and was shocked at what he saw. The tree was not only uprooted, but the remains were carried away. Indignation took over, and then anger. Cursing under his breath, he lamented that if it was in the olden days, nobody would have dared the tree and still went home to enjoy his life. Whoever tried it would not have lived to tell the story. Unfortunately, no one could say the particular identity of those who did it. Those who witnessed the felling of the tree said it was done by soldiers who came in from the 6th Motorized Battalion in Ibawa, in the neighboring Abak local government area. They came in their truck and were assisted by policemen who ensured that no one attempted to disrupt the exercise. A young man who made an attempt was picked up by the policemen and handed over to the soldiers, who thoroughly manhandled him. the team came with a man who wore plain clothes. Once the area was cordoned off, the men in plain clothes set to work with a chainsaw or a chain-powered saw. And before residents could actually figure out what was going on, the tree was removed clean from base, trimmed, and every bit of it carried away in the truck that brought the soldiers. Cutting down the tree was a surprise, but more astonishing was the identity of the man who did the job. It was curious. No one seems to know who he was and where he came from. Even the policemen could not be linked to any of the nearby formations. Only the soldiers were traced to Ibawa barracks. Because that was the only army base in the Akwa Ibom then. And because the tree had a reputation for resurrecting after being felled, those who did it this time removed it right from the base near the root and packed the stem, branches, and also the leaves and fruits away to an unknown place. To say the custodian and the traditional institution were not happy about the development would be an understatement. They were indeed livid with rage. Even community mourned. Abomination had visited the community in broad daylight and caught them napping. Though a Christian, Chief Akai lamented the cutting of the tree without prior consultation with the chiefs and elders of the community. To him, it was an invasion with genocidal propensity. It was akin to ethnic cleansing. And at the time it happened, the whole village seemed to be in deep mourning. And Chief Akai said the shrine was appeased and relocated. The mourning wouldn't stop. Some people gathered in the chief's priest's house in black dresses, carrying heavy faces and wore mournful looks. The chief priest did not quite comprehend why such sacrilege should happen in his time, lamenting the unceremonious slaying of the totem of the deity and the consecration of the shrine of their forefathers, the desecration of the shrine of their forefathers. He described it as the height of insult to the traditional institution. At least they should have had the courtesy of consulting us before doing what they did, he fumed. The Council of Chiefs did not take it lying low either. They demanded compensation for the appeasement of the gods for interfering with their abode without due authorization, and to aid the eventual relocation of the shrine. What happened to Udare Kayen also happened to its mate, Ojuku, in faraway Obunagbari in Port Harcourt. Interesting, it was also under the same authority that superintended the removal of Udare Kayen that the attack on the demystification of Ojuku happened. Brigadier General Godwin Abe, then Colonel, was the military governor of Akwa Ibom State and Rivers State respectively when the incident occurred. He was the nemesis of such trees in both states. While on an inspection tour of a project site in the Nwang area of Mbu, he was told by the traditional rulers that before the state government could relocate any project on a particular piece of land identified in the area, sacrifices must be performed. When they listed the items needed for the sacrifices, it sounded like items required for a food feast. The governor sarcastically told the traditional rulers to tell their hungry gods to look elsewhere for food, because the state government was not prepared to oblige to give them a morsel of meal. On his next posting from Akwa Ibom State, and while familiarizing himself with Port Harcourt, on arrival to assume duties in Rivers, he came across Ojukwu in the Ogbunabari area. To him, it was a familiar spirit, and he was bent on exorcising it from the system. Ojukwu's fame spread beyond Rivers. Its fame was perceived as notoriety. Those who heard of its famed reputation, often set out to find out what indeed Ojukwu was and what he was doing in the middle of the road in a cosmopolitan place like Port Harcourt. Ojukwu also had the reputation of being at the same spot for as long as any human being can remember. Inhabitants of the area claimed even their great-grandparents met Ojukwu same way it was at the time, and it stood exactly at the same spot ever since. Like its counterpart elsewhere, the story is told that it could not be brought down, and the myth was sustained by reported several attempts. It has even given impetus to the story of how some white men who attempted to bring it down ended up taking it to their heels and returning later with a sacrifice to appease the offended gods. Much later, when there was need to expand the road, the construction engineers had to leave it alone after another failed attempt to remove it. They had no option than to redesign the road. Unlike others, Ojukwu was said to be so potent that if anyone harbored any ill will against it and moved close by, something terrible could happen. Removing a twig from Ojukwu's branch would spell monumental loss and doom. Taking of photographs without permission was considered a sacrilege. However, Ojukwu, like the other spirits, had rules. But modernity seems stronger than the spirit. The spirits keep finding other abodes as the tempo of modernity pitches. Back to Akwa Ibom, something similar happened to the affair to Uyo. This was one tree that took a very long time to unravel, although it was brought down eventually. It was believed to harbor all the evils of the land. Stories were told severally of how souls were trapped in the boughs of the massive white tree by witches and wizards. Those trapped there were said to have been used for money making, unlike tales about similar trees which had both positive and negative attributes. Afiaito was reputed to be a one-way traffic for the negatives. But like others, it was similarly claimed to be unconquerable. In the late 1970s, Akpanikwong, a solo act evangelist who was on a self-appointed mission to rid Cross River and Akwa Ibom State of witches and wizards, took his battle there. His mission was to rescue the souls claimed to have been trapped inside the tree. Though his mission was said to have been partially successful, the tree was still standing there after his mission, with the famed mysterious aura still surrounding it. However, early in 1989, when Ikwadekpene Road in Uyo metropolis, where the tree stood, was expanded by PW Construction Company, the tree was brought down like any other tree found on the right of way. Before it happened, there was widely held notion that on the day an attempt would be made to remove it, Guinness all the time is there. Two things. Firstly, whether we go fit positive thing, firstly, and whether we go fit that time flesh. However, early in 1989, when Ikwadekpene Road in Uyo metropolis, where the tree stood, was expanded by PW Construction Company, the tree was brought down like any other tree found on the right of way. Before it happened, there was a widely held notion that on the day an attempt would be made to remove it, the dynamics of the rotation of the earth will change and the world will remain the same. The world will never remain the same again. When it happened, although amid trepidation among the people, the day did not exceed 24 hours, and it had both day and night in the usual measure. Mystics prophet reasons for the no-event scenario. They claimed the new status of the tree. They claimed the new status of Uyo as a state capital affected the aura of the mystical environment. And so it was no longer conducive for the spirits which had to relocate. one chance, it is far away. Her Excellency is coming, so it is far away. It was posited then that what was eventually felled was an ordinary tree. The spirits have long moved out of the place, thereby rendering the tree vulnerable. Yet others believed that Akpanekwong had demystified the tree after invading its privacy, and it no longer had the acclaimed potency, even though it still stood there after the mystery man's visitation. Also in Uyo, in the recreational area close to the State House of Assembly, there are a string of churches. There is also a huge tree.
Okay, but then again, you have about 6 minutes on this to the hour.
Also in Uyo, in the recreational area close to the State House of Assembly, where there are a string of churches, there is also a huge tree that has seen to the incapacitation of a number of bulldozers. Stories abound of a number of earth-moving equipments that have met their Waterloo while attempting to bring down the massive tree. Caterpillars deployed to bring down the tree have consistently met with very stiff resistance, and instead of the tree going down, it is rather the heavy equipment that have been breaking down. After several catastrophic but unsuccessful attempts, the tree has been left alone. Just like the Ekomi man, and Udare Kayen, Ukana Fort has imprinted its name on the soul of humanity. The Ukana Fort community in Uyo derived its name from the deity, also symbolized by a tree. Ukana is the African oil bean. Its tree is very symbolic in the culture of the people inhabiting particularly the area which used to be known as Southeastern State. Apart from its delicious bean, the tree was a common feature in every marketplace in the mainland Southeastern State. Any market that did not have the tree was regarded as not being well founded. At the Ukana Fort Shrine, sacrifices were offered for the peace and prosperity of the area by individuals and the community itself through its custodians. Till this day, traditional institutions of this area still call on the deity at times of great festivities and ceremonies, which signifies that the deity is a benevolent one. Even till today, it is one of the deities invoked while pouring libations by traditional rulers at state functions in Akwa Ibom State. A not so complimentary story is told about the Ukam Ikorusekong in Ikorusekong community in Eket. It was gathered as being so vile that the community summoned courage to get rid of it at the height of its infamy. The people of the area claimed that it was the abode of a sorcerer who locked up her victims in the bole of the tree and took their lives at will. When the development got to a head, the family of the alleged witch and the community said, enough is enough. The services of a powerful spiritual church was enlisted, and vigorous prayers were rendered before the tree was brought down. When it was felled, the old woman suspected to be behind the atrocities associated with the tree is said to have also died with it. The story has it that when the wickedness of the sorcerer was discovered and her family member decided to bring down the tree, she became very uncomfortable. On the D-Day, while prayers reached feverish pitch and the action of felling the tree was on, just about when the tree was about to fall, she ran forward and embraced it, and both went crashing down, with the woman crushed under the weight of the tree. With the exit of the twosome, community people claimed some relief came to the society. The Ikpenobo people in Etinan for a very long time witnessed an uncommon spectacle in the annals of creation. It is in this community that the famed palm tree with several crowns on one stem existed for decades. It is claimed that the palm tree originally had 7 crowns, but lost 2 some time ago. Oral history has it that Ikpenobo was made up of 7 lineages, and each of the crowns of the palm tree represented a lineage. If that was the case, it is not clear what became of the 2 lineages represented by the crowns that have fallen off, although there are still a number of issues about the tree that are still not obvious to ordinary folks. What is not in contention is the fact that no one was expected to harvest fruits from it. It yields fruits normally, but they ripen and fall off on their own. Given what has been happening to some of the otherwise potent trees, it was obvious that with determination, others that can also be similarly uprooted in spite of the myth woven around them. With that obvious reality, it would be foolhardy for some of those who faced some level of harassment in other communities to pretend that their story might be different. They knew it was just a matter of time before it came to their turn, and so they did not want to take chances. They fled the harassment. They fled when the harassment were becoming ominous. They moved from the hostile environment to more conducive abodes. 2 very important trees belong to this category: the Akanawan Ibekwe and Ndakandirai Toisien Ikonya. These trees that were seen as bad influences in their original abodes became born again in the communities they fled to. They now contribute positively to the security and progress of their new host communities, and thus are being perceived differently. Akanawan Ibekwe was originally in Ibekwe, Akpanya in Ikorabasi local government area, and was resident there for years, but had to relocate to Ikorobiosan in Orugonam, where its landlord were becoming very unfriendly, and antagonistic. Naturally, a community will be dazed to see a full-blown tree with full balls standing overnight within its environment. And the people of Ikorobiosan were expectedly stunned and confounded when it happened in their community, because they neither knew the mystery of the appearance of, nor they neither knew the mystery of or its appearance, nor the implication of its mission. Etirong Tom Umana, the village head of Ikorobiosan at the time, claims his people woke up one morning to find the tree standing in their midst. They had to consult an oracle, which is the norm when there are mysterious visitations like the one they had. To compound their consternation, the oracle warned the elders of Ikorobiosan to leave the tree alone, for it was an abode of spirits. It was claimed to harbor the souls of some people in the Ibekwe community who believed the tree possessed supernatural powers. The sudden flight from Ibekwe, Ikorapanya, in Ikorobiosan was for safety reasons. Its journey by night gave impetus to this thinking, particularly since there was an attempt to bring it down the previous day. The Ibekwe people were said to have been working on bringing the massive tree down, but they could not finish the job on the first day, and so they retired home to continue the task the following day. However, on their return the following day, they met a completely vacant space. How can a massive tree like that, known by the entire community for centuries, just disappear like that? Apprehensive, the elders decided to consult an oracle. It was there they were told that the tree had moved to a new home in Ikorobiosan, quite some distance from its original abode. They raced to Ikorobiosan, only to find the tree comfortably sitting in a good portion of a prominent land in its new host community. When a matter like this arises between two communities, especially when both communities are apprehensive of the consequences of the issues at stake, there is always an interface to resolve it. And so, a high-powered delegation from Ibekwe, led by Chief Urauda Ekpo, visited Ikorobiosan to caution the new host not to allow anything untoward to happen to the tree. It is claimed that since then, some families in Ibekwe had been going on pilgrimage to the site at Ikorobiosan. Jerry? Call my doctor. Okay. Say doctor there. The story was told that in the late 1970s, the root of the tree was cut in Ikorobiosan, its new home, and the spirit of an old woman suddenly appeared in Ibekwe Akwanikonja, wailing and complaining that the lives of her family were in danger, urging the chief of Ibekwe to intervene and implore the Ikorobiosan people to leave the tree alone. It is believed that cutting any part of the tree meant inflicting injuries on the people. There was also the story that early in 1988, when a branch of the tree was broken, the people of Ibekwe paid dearly for it. The spirit of death was on the rampage, while different forms of afflictions walked the street and visited homes in the land. The sacrifice that resolved the matter became an annual ritual in the community. Although the tree remained one of very special significance to the people of Ibekwe, the Ikorobios and people had good stories to tell and had good reasons to continue to host the tree and protect the sanctity of its abode. They discovered that its shade was a secure storehouse for farm produce. Thieves dreaded the spot. Those who made an early attempt to steal anything from its custody never made any further attempt after managing to escape the first time without fatal reminders. Whatever was kept there was not just safe, but intact. The people of Ikonya in Nsiribum had a similar experience during the reign of Chief Enwang Udo Nko Udo Paibok, when they woke up one morning to find a huge tree in their village square. The tree is said to have fled in the night from Obodom community after it was threatened by the people. When the tree arrived at Ikonya, it still carried evidence of the attack on it, and the axe used for the exercise was still stuck in the trunk. The tree's appearance in the community several decades ago was mysterious in all its ramifications. But much more than that, its continuous existence with an axe in its trunk is exceptionally bizarre. And that is why the people see it as a deity. There is a claim also that it brought succor to the community, alongside peace and exceptional blessings to the people and to the area and its people. Etirong Enefiok Stephen Akpan, who was still the village head of Ikonya in the 1990s, claims that since the tree stationed itself in the community, it's been progress all through for the indigenes, in and outside the community. According to him, since the arrival of the tree in Ikonya, in spite of its second position in the ranking of villages in Ndwedwo circuit, said according to him, since the arrival of the tree, Ikonya, in spite of its second position in the ranking of villages in Ndwedwo circuit, has assumed a leadership trait among the villages in Nsat clan. Chief Akpan often points to the emergence of 2 state military governors from the community within 5 years of each other. As evidence of the blessings the tree brought to the community, Group Captain Idongasen Kanga, who was military governor for Akwa Ibom State from 1990 to 1991, and Group Captain Sam Enwang, who was military governor for Ogun and Rivers State between 1996 to 1999. Both were wing commanders in the Nigerian Air Force when they were picked as state administrators. Incidentally, the two are first cousins and great-grandsons of Chief Enwang Udong Ko Paibok, during whose reign the tree is said to have relocated to the community. Chief Enwang Uro Nko Paibo was not only the village head of Ikonya at the time, he was seen as the paramount chief of the constituent villages that made up Ndwedwo in Nset clan. The family's continuous political dominance in the area to this day is linked to the tree's sojourn in the land. The Tuekong Senkanga has remained political leader of the local government area till now. That is according to the book. The book, for those not knowing, we are reading Echoes of the Traditional Society by Akpandem James. And so, each time a Tirongakpan has an opportunity to tell the story of the emergence and exploits of the tree, beats of ecstasy run all over his radiant face. According to him, the incidents happened during the time of a particular festival of rituals in the domain of the Obodom people. The people had decided that the tree must be removed. Young men were mobilized and they set out to work. They could not finish the work on the first day, so they left to continue the following day. On the second day, the tree was again cut down because of its massive nature. Tired, the youths left their axes in the trunk of the tree and retired for home with the intention of completing the job the following day. To their great consternation, when they arrived the following day, the tree was no longer there. It had fled in the night to Ikonya, where it planted itself in the village square. Etirongapan never hid the fact that his people were astonished to find such a huge tree, which was never in the village square before, standing there overnight. But much more than the fear of the Ikonya people was the anger of the Obodom people. They were still stunned and therefore upset with the development and vowed not to tolerate such stubbornness. They pursued the tree to Ikonya with the intention of bringing it down. But the host community would not allow it. The elders reminded emissaries from Obodom that their community has had a long history of being a land of refuge, and so would not allow that time-honored reputation to be sullied by that particular incident. They were told that anyone who escapes from danger and runs into the bosom of Ikonya community was sure of the protection, and as such, the tree would not be allowed to die in their custody. That singular act of sympathy may have triggered the milk of kindness in the tree in favor of the Ikonya community and its people. Etirongapan always seemed excited that the coming of the tree signaled the beginning of all the good things that has continued to happen in the community. He recalls that the first good thing the tree brought was the blossoming of beads which all the women in the village wore around their waist. And it still happens that any person with serious problems who gets to the location of the tree and scoops the dust of its root and chants some incantations would experience a happening in life. Just as in the case of the other trees, not even a tree one could say specifically when the Ndakandida to move to Ikonya. Just as in the case of the other two trees, not even a Tirong Akpan could say specifically when the Ndakandida moved to Ikonya, since he was born to find it there. But he recalls that it happened when Chief Enwang Uro Paibok, the great-grandfather of the former Ogun State Administrator, Sam Enwang, was the village head. This Enwang was a very young man when he became village head. This Enwang was a very young man when he became the village head. He is recorded as the first young man to rule the village. Although he was inexperienced owing to his youthful age, his reign reportedly recorded tremendous achievements and events in the history of Ikonya village. After him, Ikonya has been having old men as village heads. Tirong Akpan was the next young man since then. Ewang Urok Paibok did great exploits then. The status of Ikonya and that of his family in the contemporary history of the area is believed to be as a result of the exploits during his reign. Another tree with the same story of an axe on its trunk after an abortive attempt to desecrate it is the Efifia Ikoridamekai of Okon in Ikorabasi local government area. The tree was in the forest where the village stream called Idamakai runs. The stream used to be very special then and had its source from the rock. Its water was sparkling clean and was the source of drinking water for the villagers. Ifai Koridamekai, which was near the bank of the stream, lived for several years and eventually died and fell to the ground on its own. One day, some villagers who were searching for firewood stumbled on the fallen tree, and though it would make excellent fuel, they went for an axe and started hewing the wood. While on it, they were distracted by a bouquet of well-rounded wild green eggs, which was in full bloom in nearby in the nearby bush. They all rushed for the fruit, leaving their axe on the trunk of the wood. By the time they returned to continue with the hewing, they saw the dead and fallen tree standing erect with the axe up. Needless to say that there was commotion and wild stampede in the bush as the bewildered wood hewers and those who were fetching water from the nearby stream all scampered in different directions towards the village. 2 hours, how many? 2 hours. How many? How many minutes remain? Elders of the community were immediately alerted, and a delegation was assembled. Except for the case of the Ifyai Korida Mekai, there are certain things that are common among the mysterious trees, even with the ones that were eventually felled. All survived many generations without showing signs of aging. Seasons do not affect them. In and out of season, they remained the same. Unlike ordinary trees in normal locations, those ones do not tolerate birds living on them. Not even crows, vultures, bats, and owls, which also have some mythical rings woven around them. Birds can perch and fly away, but residency is seldom allowed, since spirits do not share their abode with temporal entities. Chapter 2, 90 minutes at Yenegua. Movie buffs would quickly connect with the film 90 minutes at Entebbe. Entebbe is a major city on the Lake Victoria Peninsula in the central part of Uganda. On July 4, 1976, during the infamous reign of Field Marshal Idi Amin Dada as head of state, Israeli commandos on a counter-terrorism mission codenamed Operation Thunderbolt successfully evacuated passengers of an Air France plane which was hijacked and detained at the Entebbe airport. The aircraft was hijacked by some members of the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, and the German Revolutionary Cells. The operation lasted 90 minutes, and all the Israelis except one and the entire Air France crew detained in the facility were rescued and flown out of Uganda that night. A similar scenario played out in Yenogwa, Bayelsa State, on Monday, July 20, 1998, when the Egbesu boys invaded the Creek Haven premises of Government House, disarmed the security operatives on duty, opened the detention center in the facility, and rescued their leader, who was held there. They went away without any meaningful opposition. Like the Entebbe operation, this one also happened in the month of July and lasted about the same space of time. It was a very dramatic incident. It astounded everybody because it exposed the hitherto impregnable government house as an entity that was susceptible to attack if any intruder summoned the necessary gumption. Just like what happened at Entebbe, the operation was clinically executed. Government house officials were baffled and completely uncomfortable with the sheer bravado of the invaders, who not only defied the security cordon at the government house, but were not bothered about the police headquarters, located at a whispering distance away. It was a strange but very captivating scenario. To the typical Bayelsians, and particularly the native Ijaw, it was just one of those things they are used to. The people are reputed to be daring fighters who would damn the consequences when their interest is at stake. They have fought the inter-ethnic wars a number of times in the past and are noted for combativeness. Their neighbors have a long history of antagonism and often attack them over land matters. So they were always prepared to either defend themselves or launch an attack whenever necessary. They live largely in the riverine areas, commonly in the marshy mangrove delta region. They share the same attribute with the Anam people of Akwa Ibom State and Ngwa people of Abia State, who are never afraid of war and who never left their neighbors in doubt as to their capacity to go the extra mile. It is very common for communities sharing common boundaries with other ethnic groups to engage in intertribal wars, basically land and such matters that have to do with inheritance. Apart from the instigation for rivalry, which they always have reasons to engage themselves, they have deities which they consult and which fortifies them for such encounters. These include the power to remain invincible during battle and proof against sharp objects and weapons of war. These are the weapons that often give impetus to such confrontations, as combatants believe they can always get away in the face of extreme danger. And the Ijaw, just like other such communities, are not immune to indulgence. To defend themselves from their usually rampaging neighbors, they developed not just their own weapons of war, but the nerve to blindly face their aggressors, which was the only way to escape being chased into the Atlantic Ocean towards the southern border. This weapon was not only physical but spiritual. The spiritual weapon was embedded in the Besu cult, a deity whose worshippers claim possess enormous invincible powers. It is the armor the Ijaw gird themselves with when going to war. Although the Besu is said to be capable of defending those who seek its protection, it would never fight an unjust cause. Neither would it be part of any callous destructive venture. Warriors who seek its guidance and protection have a code of conduct and must live by it. Anyone that flouts the code is not likely to return from an encounter with his head on his shoulder, except it is absolutely necessary for the prosecution of the mission. The warriors are not expected to embark on wanton destruction or looting of property of their enemy, and it is a taboo to rape women during the course of expedition. And so it is not surprising to those who knew all these when on that fateful day of the invasion of the State House, no one was unduly harassed, and even the rifles collected from security agencies were sent back after the Egbesu boys must have gone a safe distance away from the center of Yenagoa. Mr. Paul Orieware, the State Information Commissioner at that time, claimed that those who stormed the government house were about 100 youths. The youths were on a mission to release their leader, Timmy Kaiser Wilhelm Ogoriba, who was detained on the orders of the state military administrator, Captain Omoniyi Olubolade. Ogoriba had written a petition to the presidency alleging misdeeds against the administrator. The query the administrator received from the presidency so angered him that he immediately ordered the arrest and detention of Ogoriba for daring to smear his name. Ogoriba was not alone in the fight against the administrator. A number of local groups also did, but none of them initially sent the petition directly to the presidency. But the editor of a local tabloid, Izon Link, Alfred Egbegi, who published some of those petitions in his newspaper, was also picked up and detained alongside Ogoriba. He was released after 3 days when the body of journalists threatened to further expose the administrator if their member remained in detention much longer. There was some mystery woven around Ogoriba. He was seen as some sort of an enigma. Given such spins around him, it would have been difficult to just pick him up and get him detained just like that. The connivance of a very close ally who was a staff in the government house allegedly did the trick. He was invited there by the ally, and while there, security men swooped on him and locked him up in one of the detention facilities in the place. As at the time this happened, Ogoriba was the chairman of the Movement for the Survival of Ijaw Ethnic Nationality, MOSIEN. On receiving information that their leader has been picked up and incarcerated on the orders of the military administrator, members of MOSIEN, who were mainly youths, wrote a letter to the administrator pleading with him to release their leader. They cautioned that if he failed to accede to their plea, they would have no option than to take further steps to secure Ogoriba's release. Like most military officers in Nigeria would do, Olubolade turned a deaf ear and instead beefed up security cordon around the large expanse of the government house. The government house then was located near the creek, with the backside opening into the waters. That was why it was named Creek Haven. The main building was separated from the private jetty by a lush green lawn. The building was far from the main entrance on the main expressway, leading to Mbiama into the then waterlogged state capital. The front entrance had a very high wall with an arched canopy. Main building was separated from the private jetty by a lush green lawn. The building was far from the main entrance on the main expressway leading from Myanmar into the then waterlogged state capital. The front entrance had a very high wall with an arched canopy covering the main entrance. The gatehouse was big enough to accommodate the battery of security operatives manning the complex. The entire facility was fenced round with a low cordon running through the heavily manned waterfront. Ordinarily, it could be safe to say it was a well-secured facility. However, in the morning of July 20, 1998, the boys arrived in 4 speedboats through the creek. They anchored their boat securely at the harbor end and moved into the government house complex. They made a diagonal formation and moved towards the gates, chanting war songs and swaggering along as they did so. Normally, when warriors in the area go to battle, they would tie red bands round their heads and arms. But these youths only had white bands on their heads, which signified they were not on a bloody mission. On sighting the approaching Egbesu boys, security men on guard jumped to their feet and made to stop them. "Hey, stop there. Who are you? Who are you and what are you doing here?" they shouted in quick succession. From the indifference displayed by the advancing youth, they might as well have been shouting at the fluttering flags dancing on the array of poles that lined the guard command post near the gates. Apparently incensed by the effrontery and arrogance of the youth, who were still singing, dancing, and advancing as if they were on a carnival float, one of the security men cocked his gun and fiddled with the trigger, obviously to scare the advancing youth. Their pace did not slack one bit. Neither did the decibel of the pitch of their song diminish. The security man's colleague cautioned him against shooting at the youth, especially since they carried no weapons. Other than that, their men apparently incensed by the effrontery and arrogance of the youth, who were still singing, dancing, and advancing as if they were on a carnival float, one of the security men cocked his gun and fiddled with the trigger, obviously to scare the advancing youth. Their pace did not slack one bit. Neither did the decibel of the pitch of their song diminish. The security man's colleagues cautioned him against shooting at the youth, especially since they carried no weapon. Other than that, his colleagues might have learned from experience, as there have been several of such incidences in the state and the neighboring Delta states, where shooting at such people at the end did not only amount to waste of ammunition, but an invitation to more trouble. The trigger-happy agent did not heed the counsel of his colleagues. He was incensed that the youth were still advancing, even with his strength. Being an indigene of the same southwest region as the administrator, he may have wanted to show dedication to duty to protect his kinsman. He released volleys of shots into the air, yet the youths were not deterred. He then directed the nozzle of the smoking gun at them, but they were still advancing. None fell to the bullet. In fact, they were brushing the pellets away as the bullets hit their bodies. They kept advancing until they got to the gate, where the other security men were waiting. By this time, the brave guard had run out of bullets. He became sober, but the youths were not amused by his sudden change of mien. The youths descended on him before directing their attention to his colleagues, who were immediately ordered to surrender their weapons and lie flat facing the ground. They obeyed promptly. The boys collected the surrendered rifles and then asked one of the guards to lead them to where Ogoriba, their leader, was being detained. They got there, saw Ogoriba, and asked him to come forth. They also made to release a top government house official who was also detained there on grounds of financial impropriety. The officer declined the gesture, explaining that gaining freedom through the action of the youth might fetch him an additional charge of being an accomplice to the invasion. Having secured the release of their leader, the boys broke into another round of singing and dancing as they trooped through the government house gate into the Yenugwa Mbiama Road. As they were dancing and firing shots into the air, they were acknowledging cheers from bystanders who had thronged the route on hearing of their operation. In that mood, they made their way to the harbor, jumping into their waiting boats, and disappeared into the deeper southward end of the delta. After going a safe distance from the scene of the incident, they were said to have returned the seized rifles to a police station near the creek. While the operation lasted, the state administrator was holed up in the office of the Commissioner of Police, a few meters from the government house. Both the administrator and the commissioner only visited the scene after the invaders had long gone. Security operatives did not allow the incidents to go peacefully. As the invaders disappeared into the creeks, they descended on anyone in sight, and a fresh bubble burst open, which led to the manhandling of some persons and the attendant destruction of property. Although Commissioner Oriewere claimed that it was the invading youths that wreaked damage on property in the government house complex during the operation, his claim was countered by those who insisted that the destruction of property resulted from the commotion that followed the indiscriminate arrest of persons by security operatives after the Egbesu boys had left. Different interest groups threw up casualty figures to either justify their anger or cover up misdeeds. The dust that was kicked up by the furor which followed raged for a very long time. The Information Commissioner claimed that more than 100 youths invaded the government house complex and that no life was lost. Those who contested this claim wondered how 100 youths could have been conveyed in 4 speedboats. Both the Joint National Council and a pro-democracy group, Eastern Youth Forum, insisted that the number was increased by the state authorities to justify the arrest and detention of innocent persons. They claimed that several youths were shot or tortured to death by the rampaging soldiers. Particular mention was made of one Sele Ogonga, said to have been shot and stabbed by some military men at the harbor. Immediately, the administrator departed from the scene. Ogonga was subsequently detained, tortured until he became terribly paralyzed. The incident pitched Ijaw elders and youth against the administrator, and the face-off became messier. The Ijaw National Council, the umbrella cultural organization of the Ijaw people, fired some petition to the head of state complaining of the alleged high-handedness of the administrator in a particular petition. A particular petition signed by Chief Joshua of Fomudo and Chief F.T. Williams, President and Secretary of the INC, respectively. They complained bitterly about the detention of Ogoriba, youth leader, for writing a petition to the presidency describing the detention as illegal. The elders said it was shocking, unbelievable, and embarrassing. In that letter, sent shortly after the dramatic incident, the Ijaw National Council stated that it is a most regrettable act of disrespect to the Commander-in-Chief for Captain Olubolade to detain and torture the youth leaders for having protested to Your Excellency about his style of governance in the state. However, a cabinet reshuffle which affected state administrators 3 weeks after, precisely on Thursday, 16th of July 6, saved Captain Olubolade from more trouble. He was redeployed from the state. Although the Ijaw leaders saw Olubolade redeployment as a result of their petition, Allah saw it as a mere coincidence, since the redeployment also affected other military administrators of other states. Chapter 3. Funerals as festivals. Even in climes where dying is seen as just an act of the Creator, who reserves the right to give and take life at his behest, funeral rites do not attract the level of fanfare it does in Rivers State. In the 70s and 80s, and even up to the 90s, burial ceremonies were carried out with so much pomp and pageantry in the state, especially among the Kalabari, Ikwere, Okrika, and Ogoni people. Ironically, these are the same people who, the moment the dreaded visitor strikes, would behave as if they came on the same sojourn ticket with the departed relation. Inconsolable sobbing and wailing would take the grand stand. The people dread death, but savor the festivities that follow the drama and the fanfare that accompany the death on the last journey back to the great beyond. It is very unlikely that anywhere else would have a more cheerful and carnival-like funeral ritual in Nigeria. Very unlikely. Saying that Rivers people are the home of turning funerals into fanfare would not be an exaggeration at all. We call it celebration of life. Indeed, it seems to be, but there is some confusing twist as to what is actually being celebrated, life or death. It usually starts with the obituary, which states in bewildering details how the departed is being sorely missed by the relations. Some of the relatives listed in the obituary announcement are so distant, one would wonder what the point really is. The public is then regaled with the history and exploit of the deceased, spiced with anecdotes, for instance, of how he was among the first persons to see Queen Elizabeth of England, when she came to Port Harcourt on a visit before the 1957 Constitutional Conference. Of course, all the achievements of the deceased will be enumerated, including his children, who have made good fortunes and are bearing the glorious torch of the family to all corners of the earth. All this to show how important the deceased was. Radio Rivers expectedly would be the preferred megaphone for the delivery of the message. The announcement often starts with the precise sentimental, classic sentimental, "The earth is not my home," or "Precious Lord, leave me home," all by Jim Reeves. It is then followed by the obituary announcement, which runs like the commentary of a football tournament in the days of Ernest Okonkwo. With gratitude to Almighty God for a life well spent, we, the family of Fine-Faced Blue Bottom, of the Blue Bottom Royal War Canoe House of Bacana in the Kalabari Kingdom of Rivers State, regret to announce the passing away of our son, brother, grandfather, and great-grandfather, Chief Perebo Fine-Faced Blue Bottom, who joined his ancestors in the early hours of Monday, the 5th, 1996. He breathed his last at the Braithwaite Memorial Hospital, Port Harcourt. After a brief illness at the ripe age of 95. Until his death, Chief Perebo Fine-Faced Blue Bottom was the head of the Blue Bottom Royal War Canoe House and was one of those who led the war armada of the Kalabari Kingdom that successfully warded off the European invaders who attacked the neighboring Opobo Kingdom in the 19th century AD. Left to mourn him are chiefs and members of the great Blue Bottom Royal War Canoe House of Bacana, among whom are as indicated in the announcement, before the corpse finally beds at home, whichever village it is, it must lie in state and make brief stops at scores of places where it is received by the youth groups, women, usually amidst God salutes. Friends and relations are usually informed to file adjectives where both are ready to work overtime, conveying mourners to the hometown of the deceased. If it is across the river, funeral services are usually eclectic, traditional, and Christian rolled into one. In the state, funerals are festivals, although death ordinarily should be regarded as a bad omen, a sorrow bearer. It is not so. It's not so deeply regarded there after the first jolt of the sad news, if the carnival that usually trails the obsequies is anything to go by. It is often difficult to perceive that relations of the dead have eternally lost something precious. Usually it is a time when attires long cloaked in mold and then guns, long gone rusty with age, are dusted and oiled respectively, for they definitely will have some jobs to do. The traditional rites that follow would involve wearing of uniforms and display of dances, accompanied by the ever-present traditional gun salutes, depending on the status of the deceased in the society or community. Relations mourn their death, no doubt. They actually do, except that the festivities that trail the corpse from the mortuary to the burial site often give the impression that the monumental cultural festival was on. For instance, on a day the remains of a prominent personality of Kalabari, Ikwere, or Krika, or Ogwene are escorted on its journey from the mortuary in town to the village. A first-time visitor to Port Harcourt will mistake the funeral train for the inaugural float of the state's annual cultural festival, Reef Fest. The long motorcade, flamboyant traditional attires, the singing, the dancing, and acrobatic displays usually depict a carnival train, only that in this particular float there is usually a coffin-bearing ambulance. A particular instance lives in the memory. It was in 1996. A chief of an Ikwere community died, and his remains were kept in a mortuary around the Elechi Beach area of Nsuka Street in the Mile 1 area axis of Diop. On the day the corpse was removed from the morgue to his hometown in Port Harcourt suburb, traffic around the ever-busy education bus stop up to Mile 1 Market on Ikwere Road was held up for up to an hour. In fact, the outside right lane of the two-lane dual carriage road was blocked completely by a shrine which was moved from its traditional abode to the Udi Street, Ikwere Road Junction, to receive the remains of a man who was a prominent community leader. For more than an hour, Udi Street, which leads to Elechi Beach from the big back side of Nsuka Street, was bereft of vehicular traffic as spectators thronged the adjoining street to have a glimpse of some typical traditional masquerades. Ten. Thank you.